Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to my worst investment ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risk, but to win big, you've got to reduce it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on a mission to help 1 million people reduce risk in their lives. And I want to welcome all the listeners in New York City to the show. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz from A Stotz Academy. And I'm here with featured guest, Andrew Peck. Andrew, are you ready to join the
I'm
mission
ready.
again?
Yes, I am.
I'm excited to have you on, and I want to remind listeners that actually Andrew told us his story of his worst investment ever back in 2021. That was episode 376. So I highly recommend you go back and listen to our discussion. And, we were just talking before we turned on the microphone that, what an awful time it was in 2021, like coming out of still deep in the COVID stuff. The impact on business was tough. We both, went through plenty of challenges, just like plenty of the listeners and the viewers. And so it's great to get you back on to talk about your best investment and what you're doing, and that's really what we're going to do. And so before we get started, let me just make sure that the audience knows you and knows you well. And so let me just introduce you again. So Andrew is co-founder of Amiko XR Inc., a groundbreaking company that leverages virtual reality and artificial intelligence technologies to create immersive, personalized learning experiences available 24/7. He's a recognized C-suite advisor on innovation and human transformation. Andrew's insight on leadership and design thinking have been featured in prominent media outlets such as ABC, NBC, Forbes, and Entrepreneur. So, Andrew, what have you been doing?
Well, it's funny when you were describing since we spoke last and the period in which we progressed, this really interesting image popped in my head. If you ever saw the original Blade Runner when Harrison Ford was the lead actor, it is like a dark, rainy, just like dystopian kind of experience for three-quarters of the movie. And then eventually, I think he, of course, goes off with some attractive woman into the sunset, and the clouds part, the ray of sunshine starts to come in. Well, I kind of feel like that a little bit now that, okay, maybe the clouds are starting to part. There is new energy in the world and lots of opportunities that are emerging, thankfully, because of entrepreneurs like you and I and others continue to innovate,
Yeah.
continue to be scrappy, as we discussed, and learning to reinvent themselves. And that's pretty much where I am with my new business that I'm so excited to talk about.
Yeah, well, we did come out of darkness. And I think one of the reasons why we never had the big recession that, myself and others felt was coming was because we had a flash recession that just,
Hmm.
in a lightning flash reshaped everything. And, there was no slow burn. It was like you die. And if you can be reborn, great, but most people died. And so, what is the whole purpose of a recession? Ultimately, people think of the recession as a problem, but it's the bubble that's the problem. Recession is the
Yeah.
solution where we clear out the oversupply and the weaker players and the like. And so, however ruthless that sounds, I think that we can say that that probably is what we went through, and therefore we already did a lot of the cleanup through what a longer term prolonged recession would have done. That's my assessment of kind of what we've just been through.
Yeah, no, I think that's both a fair and healthy perspective that to harvest, crop and to get a better yield from one year to the next, you've got to prune the vines, right? Prune things. Weeds grow, right? So yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it's an opportunity during that time to sort of re-examine and reflect on, okay, what might I do differently? We all kind of going back to zero, right? And so, like that Chinese symbol, danger, opportunity. Some will choose to see this as danger, and others will view it as opportunity. Those who view it as opportunity are the ones who are going to thrive.
Those who see it as opportunities are the ones that I invite back on the podcast. So tell us. I'm so interested because for the listeners out there that don't see the video, I see some interesting things in your background. Of course, you've got a book on Led Zeppelin. You've got a picture, a painting of the Beatles. You and I are very close. Do you have a turntable? Is that what's on your?
Yeah, that's a turntable. I've got my guitar. So I'm a music aficionado. The guitar is more for show. I know a few riffs here and there. I think I really wanted to be an 80s rock band, long hair kind of guy. Just in fact, the other day, my family and I went to see Pat Benatar, so it was great fun. So yeah, music has been something is a passion of mine, more again as a spectator than anything. But
But I want to
you
know what is on your sofa.
yes, that is my Meta Quest 3 VR headset. That is the platform in which my new company called Amiko XR runs on. I can run on older versions as well, but it's a much more dynamic experience, both in terms of VR and AR.
And maybe you can just explain for the listeners and the viewers out there who never even had those things on their head and they don't even know what that thing is. Maybe
Yeah,
just give
well,
me a
I tell you,
breakdown.
my history a little bit dates itself, but like back in the late 90s, I went to a presentation on VR technology and I thought it was like Star Trek kind of stuff. It's like really crazy stuff. And it evolved for many years with applications to do simulations and from hospitals, medical equipment to industrial equipment, and it's evolved since. And then of course the gaming industry. So when you put a headset on, it really puts you into a three-dimensional immersive kind of experience in which you can see and visualize objects, or simulations that would either be for entertainment, obviously, which is huge, or for some kind of typically sort of technical application. So I've always been interested in this because my background has been to advise top leaders to help them build capabilities to be more creative and innovative. And so a lot of the work I've done traditionally has been to teach certain skills, right, around leadership, innovation, product design, business development, all those, from abstract to kind of concrete skills. And I always felt like, what are the new ways of technology that you can engage people to both absorb learning and be more engaged, not just sort of a boring traditional kind of training program, but something that would really involve them in a more immersive way. And so, of course, we just talked about over the last couple of years, Zoom and Miro and these other platforms, excellent ways to connect with people from all around the world, which has really enhanced our ability to connect. But I found we're still static, right? It didn't really create that deeper human experience. Well, very fortunately, my team and I successfully prototyped a solution in which you can bring an immersive learning experience through a headset like that, in which you can talk to a coach avatar who can teach you just about anything. There is no limit to the application. So if you're interested in finance, interested in investing, you're interested in sales, leadership, getting prepared for your career, just about any kind of topic matter, thankfully through generative AI and large language models, you are able to obtain information at your fingertips incredibly so very quickly. But the difference is it's the combination of that intelligence, artificial intelligence, combined with a VR experience. So imagine you and I being as avatars, right?
Mm.
Facsimile of us or something like us interacting with another human being who is interested in mastering any particular topic or getting support in any kind of particular challenge through simulations or role plays or evaluation. Again, it's pretty dynamic, a little bit, like trippy, because when you are in the VR headset, it's like, wow, this avatar is interacting with me and getting to know me, right? And I'm getting to know that avatar. and building a relationship, if you will, in a profound way.
And how does that, like, what's the advantages for someone, let's just say, a traditional guys like us, let's say we learn through maybe reading physical books or those types of things. And nowadays, people go on the internet and they search or they type in the chat GPT or something like that. What is the benefit of using this as a mechanism to get the information?
Yeah, that's a great. So it's the design is not. It's not to suggest, oh, this is going to replace all forms of learning. I would be hypocritical based on my background not to suggest that it's nothing quite like, in-person human experience, but that there are multiple modalities to do that. Like you said, reading, listening. There's a variety of ways to sort of absorb content on a sort of cognitive level, but also emotional, to have shared kinds of experiences, whether it's with yourself. Let's say you're taking a walk in nature. I mean, there's could be a learning experience there, right? So there's obviously many ways to learn, but with this technology, this provides you with an additional resource that is personalized. It really matches what your needs are at your pace, and it is available to you whenever. So it provides you that incredible scale and flexibility and convenience. So if you're working on a problem, or let's say you're going through a learning module of some sort, you're learning something on how to be more effective salesperson, and you have to go through a progression of modules, you'd have this ongoing coach, right? And maybe there's still an instructor, a human instructor, but this gives you the ability to, in case you didn't understand anything in the training program, the traditional training program, this would be augmenting that by supporting you, a tutor, a coach, throughout the process.
And how would it get the information it's bringing to you? Would it get it from studying the materials of that particular trainer in that case, or would it get it from more general sources?
Yeah, so our solution is it's configured to those experts. The content is important. So yes, on a generic level, yes, it can work. It can draw from what's sort of general information and insights available, out on the web, right? But what makes our solution unique is it's curated and configured to the expert. So it learns, you teach the avatar, and the avatar then teaches others, which is, for the teacher, if you will, is a huge sort of, like, I know as a uh, sometimes guru, lecturing and teaching, I can't be everywhere.
Yep.
So for me, even for my own business, this is like an appendage of what I can provide at scale to others without necessarily having to show up in person.
And one of the things I developed over the years is an online course called Valuation Masterclass. And I offer that every 10 weeks or so, and it's a 6-week course. And what I learned from the COVID time was that you don't want to be in front of students, giving PowerPoint presentations. And what I wanted to do is I created videos, 10-minute, maybe 20-minute videos of content. And I told stories and I showed examples. And I have about 30 hours of content that I've perfected over the years. And now what I do is I drip that content to my students on a weekly basis so they know exactly what they're going to get. And I track their performance to give them a report on Friday, an update on where everybody's at. And I kick people out if they're not up to date because I say it's a boot camp. I do it in what I call a boot camp format of
Mhm.
this material. And then what I do is I go live on Mondays and Fridays, and I do that for an hour to an hour and a half. And then they consume the content. And I'm just curious, thinking about what you're doing with this, what would be different, or what would be the benefit, for instance, if I was to say, I could bring this into your type of platform. What would be the benefit that my students would get?
Pretty dramatic, because it would, ingest your content, become as master as are you in the subject. First of all, so on a sort of intellectual basis, it has that same level of facility and intelligence, if you will. But then it also is there to, so that as students go in a more static environment, so they get the videos, which is great. And I do that a lot as well in my programming. But this is much more interactive, dynamic, and even, do I dare say, a little human centric. So you are actually talking to somebody like you, that if you are unclear on something, or you want to probe further, or even get additional guidance or resources, this solution would facilitate that, right?
And
And it can also provide, you mentioned analytics. It can provide you, for example, you get, information, transcripts. You don't have to even take notes, right? So it can provide you with a record of what you're learning. So it again reinforces that through other sort of output, not just the experience when you're in the headset.
so let's talk about the aspect of kind of populating data into it, which, for instance, I have everything I've ever done with this course is recorded, and it's audio, video recorded, and the PowerPoint, the presentations that I give, are very polished in PowerPoint that they're watching, and I'm talking to them face to face and speaking directly to them. And then most of the time when I do a live session, I finish the live session in an hour, and then I say, all right, we're open up for office hours. And then I'll go on for another half an hour to an hour where I say, you can ask me any question. So I have recordings of all of those office hours, and I probably have 100 questions now since I've had 16 boot camps. I probably have a great database of the types of questions that I've been asked. Would that be how would we populate this, with the right information? And how do we also protect it so that that information is not just dispersed out into the world, and then all of a sudden the competitive advantage I'm trying to give my students, they can get anywhere?
Sure. I mean, it would be to follow a similar model, not to go into too much gory detail, but a license arrangement, so proprietary information. So Andrew Stotz, boot camps, and it could be, either you have one master, or you could have several sort of avatars that we would design for you in order to provide that. You could have many, and even the possibility of having multiple interact at the same time with that experience. So it's not just you and one person, it could be multiple boot camp leaders, if you will, that represents your information. And obviously the person who is experiencing that, purchasing the buyer, would, there's privacy there, right? Privacy in terms of your content, but privacy also in terms of their experience, right? So when we're going into corporations to provide this, inevitably, depending on the subject matter, there might be what people like about it is it's safe. Like the psychological thing, somebody smart as you to ask sometimes a question can be intimidating, but they can use this technology to ask that quote unquote dumb question, right? So again, it gives you just some extra horsepower around your expertise that would be safeguarded for you as a business owner, but also safeguarded in an intimate way for the learner.
So, in this case, my situation may not be the optimum. So my next question is, I have 130 students in this boot camp number 16 that started 3 weeks ago. We're halfway through it, and they're from about 12 different countries, including some students that really have very low income, and they have a real passion for learning valuation, but they don't have, they're living in maybe Nigeria, and they're living in maybe Egypt, or they're living in Cambodia or Philippines, where annual income is tiny. I'm assuming that these guys wouldn't be able to buy the types of devices and things that would be necessary, but at a corporate training level, it would definitely be possible. But tell us more about the access.
Sure. Yeah, so it's we call it Amiko XR for a reason. It's extended reality or mixed reality, which implies VR is sort of our signature, but because of the three-dimensional immersive sort of experience. But mobile is another. So if you cannot afford, or you're not where you're at a place where you can put your headset on, because sometimes people don't want to put the headset on. We recognize that you can still maintain continuity with your coach avatar, your Stotz avatar,
Mm.
that would be more on your phone, right? Or augmented, because of the hardware, and it continues to evolve. We're not in the business of the hardware. Obviously,
Yeah.
that is a manufacturer who produces that sort of thing. But because of the innovations around that, the capacity of that is increasing dramatically, and therefore our abilities to configure the visual experiences pretty powerful, even where you can do it in an augmented fashion,
Mm.
right? Where that avatar is like, there they are sitting in your living room.
So the answer to that question is that for someone that can't have a headset, they're still going to have access to the avatar and to the,
Yes,
just that
yeah,
they're not going to
exactly.
have that
Yeah.
immersive reality, but they're still going to get the
Yeah, no, in
ability.
all transparency, as obviously a new fledgling startup around this, we recognize some of the barriers to cost, entry because of that, right? Obviously, it's perfectly suited, which is kind of our primary focus is corporate, right? But over time, we, hope to expand that into the general public, where individuals or entrepreneurs, can obtain that, because we see, the ability to scale it. It's eventually somebody buys a computer, right? At one point, a computer was so cost prohibitive for everybody, but now they'll either have that or at least an iPhone.
And
So
what maybe you could describe what you think is the ideal setting. So if someone's listening and they hear, okay, I've got that setting, this is ideal for for the adoption of this and getting the maximum value out of it, what would it be?
you mean in terms of the learning kind of
What
application,
I mean
or?
is let's just say I'm a mid-sized business, I'm a large business, I'm a small business. I've got 1,000 people I'm trying to train. I've got 50 people I'm trying to train. I'm trying to train people through Zoom courses, or I'm trying to, do video content. Like, who would be able to immediately benefit from this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly mid large size corporations, or even smaller corporations who can't afford expensive training or trainers, who are looking to provide any type of training, from onboarding new employees. So imagine when you hire somebody, there's generally an immediate, and over let's just say 90-day period of time, then become familiar with the company, the policies, the vision, the plans. This tool would be, it's very useful in that capacity. But then an ongoing basis, so that when you have, courses that you're required, either specific to your job or generalized for management leadership courses, you can access that just like you would a course library, right? So the new program on XYZ, you download that. So it can be, again, what we've explained to our clients is, think of this as, again, it's just another platform from training, but the difference is it's at the convenience of your home. Most people nowadays are spending some time at home, not always in the office, so they don't have to worry about going into the physical space to have the experience of an immersive learning experience. They can
Hmm.
literally do that sitting on their couch, which, oh, by the way, unlike gaming, you're not moving around. A lot of people think, oh my God, the dizziness and with the VR, it's not anything like that. It's a much more stationary experience, right? Just like
It'd
you
be
and
a
I are.
relaxing. Yeah, you could be
Yeah, it's
relaxed.
very relaxing, right?
Um, what's interesting is there's a good book by Michael Michalowicz called Clockwork, and it's about standardizing your business and all that. And one of the things that he addresses is, the hard thing is that there's standard operating procedures and people write those out. And, that's like the way that people try to, train in the company. And what I liked about what he talked about was the idea of doing these short videos rather than doing the SOPs in that traditional sense. And he was talking about startups and mid-sized businesses. So this just made me think of him. By the way, he was episode 618 on the podcast. So, but I was just thinking that, for those people that are much more video oriented, you could be developing your standard operating procedures and doing that and presenting that through, your technology.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It is very, intended to be very visually engaging. Um, uh, uh, because we recognize that's especially nowadays. I've written several books. I write articles still, and then like you, I read books. There's nothing like a hardback book. I'm like one of those geeks, carrying a big hardback book on the airplane, kind of thing. Not necessarily Kindle, but um, we're a YouTube society. We want that sort of quick, ingest knowledge and information. Our attention span is, unfortunately waned, but this provides you with that, can be at your pace and but still absorbing kind of experience, right? You're not going to necessarily be, I mean, you can, hours at a time, in a headset, necessarily, but that's why we're designing it so that there's different modalities too, to take into consideration those human needs.
And how would it go, for instance, if you talk to a company and you were presenting it to them and they're interested, and they want to understand how would we onboard this, what's required, what does it cost, those types of things. Can you just explain how the implementation goes?
Yeah, so typically it, begins with some, obviously what we call pre-consult, which will usually involve a demo, just so that they get the experience, something that maybe is more generic, just so they get a feel. Because there's some very sophisticated users who like get it right away, and others maybe not. So we recognize that, and then we really start to do some pre-planning and diagnostics. So we try to understand what are the skills or the capabilities or issues that they're trying to address that this technology could really accelerate and have a more dramatic impact, right? And at scale again. So then we'll do a diagnostic, and then based on that, we'll usually then configure sometimes a pilot. So we take a small group to just test that this meets their learning needs, and then scale it, right? So if you want to deliver, so we take a handful of people to just maybe perfect it, like you would any new technology introducing into the workforce, and then scale it. If you're talking 100, 1,000, or somewhere in between, or more or less, then you can distribute it, and usually then it's done on a monthly license basis. We recommend typically, usually most learning kinds of experience, they get the full sort of benefit is you want to try do this for at least 90 days, right? Again, that may vary depending on the kind of learning objectives you have. Which,
And
by the way, what in the diagnostic and the assessment phase, we are also, because of my background, other members on my team, we are in a traditional way mapping out what the learning journey is, right? We are also trying to understand what content a client wants to make sure our avatars ingest and become masters at, so that they can then educate others.
and how would you pitch it to, let's just say, two different types of businesses? One that really knows nothing about any of this and they don't have that much sophistication in any of this, whereas you've got maybe a bigger business that has been doing a lot in the training space and is looking, they're constantly looking for new ways of doing things. How would you pitch it for those two different, groups of businesses?
Yeah, I mean, what I suggested earlier with the less sophisticated or newer to this sort of technology, we start small, right?
Yep.
So why having a pilot phase is important. For a larger corporation who's used to using and is innovative, you might be able to just say, this is the objectives, and configure the solution and then roll it out, right? Um, both, and there's two aspects of it. There's obviously a cost consideration. They're ready to invest dollars toward that, both in terms of hardware and software, but then also the change management. They're confident that this new way of engaging the learning experience in their workforce will be easily adopted, right? But because it is in generally speaking pretty new, we're like prepared to like sometimes go slow to go fast, right? To make sure that people understand the power behind the technology and that we also configure the right solution for them.
One of the things that I do is I work with family businesses, and one of the benefits of family businesses is that they can have some continuity in their culture, in their values, in the way they run the business. And I think the best example in Asia for that is Toyota, which for almost 100 years has perpetrated its values and its engineering focus and that type of thing. And I was thinking about it for my own business, my coffee business, where my business partner and I are the owners, and we want to convey, how to behave in certain situations. We want to convey the values of the business to all employees so that they get it and they feel like they're really joining something. Now we can do that through some basic videos, but we just don't have time, and we try and then this and that. And I'm just curious, if somebody wants to convey that type of message in every situation, to say, how do you handle a customer that's mad, or that type of,
Yeah, you can
how would that could work?
exactly, and you can do that scenario, but there's a couple of interesting points that you made there. One, you can do that simulation or scenario based so that like say, yeah, customer is difficult, how do you handle a situation again in sort of this safe, unbiased, not that you can't build judgment and evaluation, it will, but it's also a great place to practice, right? You know, uh, that's why they call meditation practice, right? You have to keep doing it. Any good physiologist or sports person also knows you got to keep exercising and working out. It's practice, right, in order to perform well. And that's what this enables you to do. But you said something else that I don't know if that's where you were going, Andrew, but this has this unique, and we are exploring this now with a couple organizations as a legacy building tool. So people have strong founders or ones who don't necessarily even have to be alive still, which that's the trippy part, how do you preserve this history and legacy of Toyota, for example? Well, why not have avatar the founders and is close to representing them and their story and their legacy to ensure that that's an enduring kind of story. I know you're
So
smiling.
fast. I mean, my mind's on fire with that. That is so
Yeah,
fascinating.
so I mean, we're talking to some museums and foundations that have bringing history to life through the voice of people who have, passed on to share their points of view on whatever particular topic, whether it's art or civic, education or anything in between, right? So
It
it's
it reminds me of something. I have kind of a funny fantasy here in Thailand, and that is I've read, at least 50, if not 75 or 100 books on the US Civil War. I've watched every show, every video I could over the years, and I know these generals pretty well, and And I know the Civil War very well. And so I thought to myself, I definitely could be the best, probably the best US Civil War history teacher in Thailand, because I suspect there's not a lot of US Civil War history teachers in Thailand. But I was thinking that if I taught that class at a university, each class I would dress up as a different general. And I would come in character as William Tecumseh Sherman, as General Custer, as Robert E. Lee, and as all of these different characters, Longstreet, and all of these characters, and come in and speak in their voice, wear their outfit, and get across what's going on in their mind at that time. Stonewall Jackson is a great example where he did his Valley campaign in the Shenandoah Valley, one of the most successful campaigns of all time, but he never, ever, ever told any of his lieutenants what they were doing until the day they did it. And what a character, It's incredible. So I was just thinking about what you're saying, legacy, and trying to bring the vision of history, and legacy owners and founders, into real life.
Well, and it's so funny you say that because not too long ago, about a month ago, I was in this city and I hadn't seen it, and it's kind of a funny story. I went to Grant's tomb, the
Yep.
old like who's in Grant's tomb? Well, it's Ulysses S. Grant. Very interesting, somewhat stern, stark, kind of, but beautiful all at the same time, and a very interesting human being who's, I think, a bit of an enigma, right? And his influence on U.S. government and politics and slavery, Abraham Lincoln, of course, gets lots of accolade, but Ulysses S. Grant is a much more powerful figure in our American politics than people realize. And I was thinking at the time, like, oh, this would be really cool to bring his legacy in this dynamic. I haven't yet approached the Grant Museum, but maybe I will. But you could literally do that to do exactly what you described, to create that visceral experience as if it were told from, these individuals who.
Well, these guys wrote memoirs, and
Yeah,
they
exactly.
they have their voice. And his memoir was particularly amazing because he basically went bankrupt at the end of his life and lost everything. And
Yeah,
his
he did.
family,
And what people didn't realize because of his ill health, he enlisted Mark Twain, which is part of the reason why he went to New York. He was originally from Ohio, but he's buried in New York because he became really good friends with Mark Twain. So can you imagine doing something like this and then not just only having the perspective of Ulysses S. Grant, but you'd have Mark Twain's point of view, or you'd have, like you said, Sherman, some of his, generals that he fought alongside of him. Again, it's limitless. Yeah,
and the other thing about Grant that was so amazing was, at the end of his life, he got throat cancer, and so he couldn't
yeah,
dictate his book anymore. He had to write it by pencil, and he was in extreme pain, and he wrote 600,000 words, 700 page, something like that, in incredible detail. And there's pictures of him. It's funny that I'm having a throat problem right now, but there's pictures of him, with something wrapped around his throat, with a shawl in a rocking chair. It's just amazing to think about bringing that to life.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, you've inspired me. I am going to contact the Grant Museum. But yeah, so I mean that's the idea, we're obviously, I have a strong sort of bias, toward learning, and then how do you create more immersive experience? What's remarkable is to do it in a way that brings both knowledge. We want to learn, right? We want to absorb information, but you also want wisdom, and that comes through interaction and trial and error and experience, right?
Yep.
And you can't always get that like you wanted to just searching the internet or even reading a book necessarily. Why you want a book club, right? Or why you want to go to a seminar, but you can't always do that either. And especially, and we're partnering with organizations to provide this to people who are in economically disadvantaged situations. So partnering with corporations who can help underwrite this, but to people who don't have the advantages like you and I had, not just because of the color of our skin, but just economic circumstances, we got, a leg up, so to speak. So this can provide a more sort of, I dare say, sort of democratized solution, right? Why do all the executives in the senior ranks of organizations get the high price coaching and consultants?
Mhm.
This could be provided to everybody. Everybody gets their own coach.
Mhm. So in wrapping up, tell us where we should go to learn about more and, close out with any last words.
Yeah, so we have our landing page, which is still under progress. That will have demos and all that sort of thing forthcoming. But obviously, AmikoXR.com. And then if people are interested and they're serious about understanding how this might really profoundly help their organization, they certainly can contact me at Andrew P. at AmikoXR.com. So and the P is for Peck, right? So
Perfect. And I'll
uh,
put links to that in the show notes so they can just click on those and
yeah, they can drop me a line. I'd love to begin a conversation. We can, talk about a demo and that sort of thing. So
well, it's great getting you back on and, catching up with what you're doing and, it's exciting. And I really wish you well. And I know for the listeners and viewers, if you're interested in this and you see some value for you, click on the links in the show notes and it'll go there and you can learn more. Andrew's always open to talk and interact, and I've appreciated that in our relationship that we built through the podcast. So, any parting words?
thank you so much, Andrew, to have me on. It's great to see you. And, I am excited about the future. So back to the beginning of our conversation, the clouds have parted and the rays of sunshine are beaming in. So blessings to you and everyone else.
Abundance, ladies and gentlemen. This is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz, saying, I'll see you on the upside.